Welcome to BookSight, a weekly podcast dedicated to accounting, bookkeeping, and small business tasks. Here's your host, Taylor Arndt.
Hello everyone, welcome to BookSight episode 4. Wow, has it been a week. I have had a lot going on, and it's just been absolutely crazy with an impending winter storm in Texas. Down here in Texas, it has been a lot less snowy, no snow, but it's still been very cold, so we'll just hope that our power grid decides it's going to hold up. That would be helpful. But apart from my news, we've got a lot on the accounting and bookkeeping front as well. So before I get into everything on the bookkeeping and accounting front, what I want to do is I want to talk about our sponsor. And our sponsor is Taylor's Financial Services. It's almost tax time, and that means that it's really about time that you get your books in order. If you are thinking right now that you need to spend your entire Christmas break getting your books in order because you haven't done it the rest of the year, then I think it's about time that you find a bookkeeper. And if you think that your employee payroll reports haven't been reconciled all year, I also think it's time for you to find a bookkeeper and a payroll specialist like myself who can assist you with these tasks year-round. That way you don't have to spend time away from your family reconciling your reports, and you can focus on what you do best. So I've got a lot of different topics that I want to go ahead and go through this week, and I really want to talk about the new year because the new year is upon us, and with a new year comes a new opportunity to improve processes. As an entrepreneur, we all know how hard process improvements and changes can be in trying to work in our business, but I think the beginning of the year is a great time to evaluate our processes. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about everything from business bank accounts to payroll systems and everything else in between, maybe accounting software, and also website vendors. So it's going to be a jam-packed episode. The first fundamental part of your equation of your business is your bank account. Having a great bank account can make or break your business literally, or in my case this week, make or break your QuickBooks. Let me explain. I've got a client who has a QuickBooks file, and they also have a bank that I'm not going to name. So we're just going to call this a bank. And I was doing some reconciliations, trying to prepare for tax time and getting everything ready for a CPA. And I noticed that her bank feed disconnected. This is not something that doesn't surprise me, right? This always happens about every day or two. But I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'll reconnect the bank feed. Little did I know when I reconnected the bank feed, I was going to be in a world of hurt. So I reconnected the bank feed, and I'm like, I don't see any transactions here. This is strange. I looked in the excluded, I looked in the deleted, I looked in all my different tools to reclassify transactions, and I'm like, there's no transactions here. What the heck? So then I'm like, So then I do it again, and I'm like, wait a second. My chart of accounts is gone. And I'm like, oh, is this really what I thought happened? If it is, oh crap. I'm in a very bad problem situation right now. Sure enough, my chart of accounts were totally fried. I'm like, Okay, so apparently when I reconnected this bank feed, it purged my QuickBooks file. Well, in my mind I'm thinking, well, this is awesome, because I know that my client logs into QuickBooks on a regular basis to check reports and things, and now I'm going to have to tell her that, well, unfortunately, your bank that you are going to have to break up with eventually, which she did, just deleted all of your transactions. That's going to be wonderful. I'm going to have to tell her that. But of course, when I did this, it was 11 o'clock at night, so I decided that I wasn't going to tell her till the next morning. So the next morning, I tell her, and I'm like, hey, by the way, your awesome bank friend decided it was going to delete all your transactions when I had to reconnect yesterday. And now I'm just like, I'm going to have to manually import everything from July, because that's when she had her other bank. So she had another bank that she used for 4 years. Then they decided they were going to be really, really stupid. I don't know the details. That was before I came along. And so she switched to another bank. And this other bank had this problem with QuickBooks. And so then I had to try to re-import everything from July 1st. Do it all manually, try to convert everything, PDF bank statements, of course. They don't want to give us CSVs because that's just the wonderful thing to do. They want to make it difficult. So they give me a PDF file, which by the way is in a very bad PDF format, that basically when I try to convert it to CSV, it's pretty terrible. So That has been a very fun process. Well, I finally got some things figured out, and I'm going to go ahead and reconcile the accounts, but when I went ahead and reconciled the accounts, I noticed one thing that's very, very bad, I guess you'd say, for accessibility. Y'all, when I reconcile the accounts, if you're an accountant, you know how it goes. You want to look for the blue and green check marks, right? You want to see if things are cleared by the bank. That's kind of how you want to do it. You want to see if things are cleared or things are uncleared. Well, for us blind users, all we get from QuickBooks when we're in the window is just a simple button. That's right, the check marks that are supposed to indicate whether they're cleared or uncleared just read the word button. So Intuit, if you decide that you ever want to watch this podcast, I would urge you that I think it would be a great idea to change your labels on your check marks for your transactions to indicate to the blind user that your transactions are either cleared or uncleared. Because right now, this is a violation of a WCAG guideline for using color alone to indicate the state of the control, and therefore is not accessible. So you know what I have to do when I have to reconcile transactions that are at least $1,000 off or more? I have to play the guessing game. I have to unclick and click check marks until I get it right. That is a huge time waster. I'm telling you right now, that's a huge time waster. So QuickBooks, I would urge you to fix that right now. Or at least try to look into it, because there's really no way I can reconcile. Now, obviously, there is. I just have to play this check mark and uncheck mark game, but luckily I get paid to do it. But it's still really annoying, and my clients are paying for inaccessibility. So, I would really encourage you guys to make sure that your software is accessible. And the other thing, too, is that whenever I want to see the difference of the balance, I want to make sure it gets to 0, but all I have to do is go to the top of the screen and see the difference. That's right, every time I reconcile a transaction and click those check marks, it brings me all the way to the bottom. That's fun, right? So I have to go all the way to the top again and then go to the tables and then try to see my difference. Intuit, wouldn't it be great if we could have an ARIA Live region that would update the difference every time a check mark is unchecked and checked? That might be helpful. Just saying. So, apart from my QuickBooks gripes aside, QuickBooks is still my favorite accounting software, just because they're very committed to accessibility. But if we can make it a little bit more accessible, I'm all for it. So if you are thinking about your processes and you're thinking that your bank is just not working for you and you're just having trouble reconciling your accounts because you have to manually import everything and, well, heaven forbid your QuickBooks gets purged every time you reconnect to the bank, it's time for you to find a new bank. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, here's the thing. It's the beginning of the year, so it's a really great time to switch banks because you don't have a lot of historical data for your new tax year. So here's what I'd recommend. If you can, start with a new bank at the beginning of the year. Step 1. Step 2, find a bank that will meet your needs. Easier said than done. I'll explain that in a minute. Step 3, try to get as little fees as possible. Banks can give you fees all the time. Make sure they're easy to waive. Step 4, make sure that your bank has merchant services that could integrate with your existing systems. I would hate to switch to a bank and then all of a sudden realize that the merchant services that they want to set me up on have no integration with my accounting software. Wouldn't that just suck? Yeah, it would, because I've done it before. Don't do that. Step 5, make sure that you have a bank that is accessible. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're doing a lot of checks and you've got a lot of checks from clients and you also have a lot of cash deposits, then you need a bank with branches. You need a Chase, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, the big giants, or banks that have local branches, or a local credit union. But step 6 is that if you have a local credit union and you travel a lot, that might not be a great idea because of the ATM access. Now, a lot of credit unions are part of a shared ATM branch network between a bunch of credit unions, but still it could be a lot harder to try to find an ATM if you're out somewhere than if you have a bigger bank. So with everything aside, banks can make or break your business. And just because you bank with a bank that is a good personal fit does not mean that it's a great business fit. So let me explain. There are banks out there that are specialized in personal financial wealth. Think of an Edward Jones or some kind of bank that, specializes in personal wealth management. Do you think that their staff or their financial advisors are going to have the expertise to help your business grow and succeed? Do you think that they're going to have the features needed for a bank for a business owner? Probably not. If you want a wealth management solution that is geared for people instead of businesses, then that won't be very helpful, as you're going to not have the features you need to run a successful business. Also, the staff aren't going to really understand what it's like to run a business, because probably a lot of them don't. So what I would say is choose a bank that specializes in business. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, obviously a lot of our banks have business bankers, right? You know, your Chases and Wells Fargos and Bank of Americas and all that stuff. But if it's just like a small bank, you want to make sure that they have the knowledge to help you with your business banking needs, and ask questions. You know, talk on the phone before you even go into a bank and set up an appointment. Ask them fundamental questions. Ask them questions such as, 1, how much are your fees? 2, how can I waive the fees? 3, do you have merchant services like I talked about earlier? 4, who are your merchant services provided through? 5, do you have other business services such as insurance or other discount programs? Because a lot of them do. 6, do you have a POS or point of sale system that if I'm a brick and mortar business, I can integrate with? Very important, just like merchant services. 7, do you have 24-hour customer support or customer support that is accessible in case there is a problem? 8, you want to ask about the time when you can book an appointment, because if they're going to say, oh, you can't book it for a few more weeks because our vice president of business operations is gone, well, chances are that they only have a single point of contact for business banking, and that would not be a good solution, as there would only be one person in that organization who handles businesses. Instead, you want to make sure that you can get an appointment sooner than later, because number 1, you want to get a new bank. Number 2, you want to make sure that no matter what, no matter who's in or who's out, you can get the help you need. And I would also ask questions, when I get there, or even before, about, can my employees have a debit card? Because if you've got employees and they are going to be buying things for your business, it's very important that they have a debit card or some way to be able to purchase things. Yes, you can do reimbursals and things, but that just makes it a lot more tedious on the accountant. So, speaking from an accounting perspective, if you've got a lot of different things that you're trying to do and you want to make sure that your employees can purchase products, see if the banks will allow you debit cards for your employees. I know that Chase does, and that's actually very, very useful. And I would also ask about virtual and physical debit cards, because that way if you want to have them on like your Apple Pay or Google Pay or other things, you need to have a bank that is versatile and their app is working properly. So, now that you've got your new bank, you're pretty much feeling all happy and things. You've connected it to your QuickBooks. It's not purging your QuickBooks file, which is always great. And it's staying very stably connected. Next thing is you need to decide your payroll software. So, if you're really unhappy with your payroll software and you're thinking, well, it's really time for a change and I don't know what I'm going to do, I would advise you start thinking about it right now. Because here's the thing. January is the best time to switch payroll software. Not in the middle of the year, not whenever you feel like it, but January. First of the year, preferably, you want to start the process like in December. Because here's the thing. Trying to switch payroll software is an absolute royal pain in the butt. Because then you have to try to import old records, and then your employees have to re-sign up, and my employer right now is actually doing the same exact thing. So for my full-time job, we were using Insperity, we're using ADP now. But they went ahead and started it now because it's the beginning of the year in January. That way we could have everything for next year. And that way we wouldn't get possibly 2 W-2s. Wouldn't that be a pain in the butt? Yeah, I think it would. So, to avoid having 2 W-2s or other tax forms, and to avoid having to import things, I would recommend starting your payroll search early if you want to change in 2023. Now, what do I look for when I want to switch payroll systems? Well, that's a really great thing to ask. So, payroll, again, can be a royal pain in the butt. But here's what I recommend. First, go with what your accountant recommends, right? Your accountant or bookkeeper, if they do payroll, they understand how payroll works, and they've got a preferred system. For me personally, I prefer QuickBooks Payroll over a lot of the competition. And here's why. Number 1, I know the back-end interface is accessible. Being a blind bookkeeper, I've got a unique perspective. But being that I have to use the back-end to issue paychecks and issue 1099 forms and issue, pay stubs and things, I want to make sure that the back-end is accessible. Also, it's integrated with my accounting software. Now, I know a lot of people who use Xero and FreshBooks are going to turn around and tell me to my face right now that I shouldn't use QuickBooks Payroll because if I wanted to switch accounting systems, then I couldn't do that because QuickBooks Payroll only integrates with QuickBooks. And to that I say, yes, I understand that, but here's the thing. If I want to switch accounting systems, I would do that at the beginning of the year too. So, that's just something else to keep in mind. But here's the thing. I am very happy with QuickBooks Payroll, and I understand there's others like Gusto and things out there as well, but QuickBooks Payroll integrates with QuickBooks. Also, since I am an accountant, I get free access to payroll because I am a QuickBooks accountant user, and that's just what I get. But would I never recommend my clients to sign up for accountant users to get free payroll? Absolutely not. Do not do that. Do not ever do that, because that's just taking advantage of the system. QuickBooks Online Accountant is meant for accountants, not meant for business owners who want to try to cheat the system. I know. I'm probably going to get a lot of messages on my message box that says, oh, you should. No, don't do it. Because I'm telling you, they will crack down on it. They will crack down on people trying to create free accounts just to get free payroll and free into QuickBooks. Don't do it. So, make sure that you don't do that. But also, it's pretty affordable, and for accountant users who are doing it legitimately, you can be able to invite your clients and get a 30% discount if you're a QuickBooks Pro Advisor. So if you really want someone and you want a discount, I'd recommend going through a Pro Advisor instead of doing it for yourself illegally. That's just what I'd recommend. Do with what you please. But the thing is that QuickBooks Payroll is pretty affordable. Yes, it may have some problems, and yes, customer support may not be as great as some of the other competition, but here's the thing that I like. Number one, if you are very tax afraid or you're very afraid of the IRS, I know a lot of people are. Sometimes I am, because I'm like, oh boy, what are they going to do to me now? If you go with their elite plan, they have got a $25,000 tax penalty protection. What does that mean? Well, if the IRS comes knocking on your door and they're like, hey, you need to pay some employment taxes, and here's a notice. Well, Intuit will go fight on your behalf, and they'll go tell the IRS, well, no, they don't, or maybe they do, but they will help reimburse $25,000 or up to $25,000, I believe that number is, in payroll tax liabilities since you paid for the elite plan. I believe, again, I'll put a link in the show notes to check the exact compensation, but if you are really afraid of the IRS and you just want it to be dealt with and you don't want to have to do a bunch of tax hefty penalties, then I would recommend using the elite plan. It is more expensive, but again, if you're a lot more tax afraid and conscious, then I'd recommend doing that. But also you get a free time tracker called QuickBooks Time. It used to be called T-Sheets. QuickBooks Time is a great time tracker. I use it all the time. And basically, you can have your employees track time for their jobs, and even if you're on like a, job, if you're like on a construction site, they can log their location, so it'll geofence it to make sure that they're actually tracking time instead of tracking time going to their house. So you can actually have a geofence around the work site, so you can actually look at where they're tracking time at, which is very helpful. And you can also integrate it with payroll. So, QuickBooks Payroll is my preferred vendor. Now, having said that, though, I understand that QuickBooks Payroll isn't for everyone. There's also other options like Gusto and ADP and Paychex. What I will say is ADP, I've found, is more suited for larger businesses. All the ADP employees are going to argue with me about that one. But here's the thing. In order to get ADP set up, you have to contact ADP for a quote, y'all. That means that you have to go through the sales process and you got to talk to someone on the phone for maybe 30 minutes and then they'll finally tell you an amount per month. I think that's just a pain in the butt. Now, wouldn't it be easier if you could just go on a website like QuickBooks or Gusto or others and just have upfront transparent pricing, especially if you're a one-person operation, maybe you're running an S-Corp and you need payroll? Well, that's why I would say ADP is not for you. But if you've got, a lot of employees and maybe 20 to 30 or maybe more, and you've got international employees, that's really where ADP shines. Because at my job right now for where I work full-time, we've got a lot of international. And so ADP is really great for that because it helps with international employees. So ADP is a good system, but again, it's not for everyone. Neither is any of these payroll systems. if you're going to switch payroll systems, you want to do it at the beginning of the year, and you want to make sure that you have everything ready by January 1 to use your new payroll system. The next thing you maybe want to decide is, I want to switch my accounting software. For whatever reason, I'm just not happy with that software. I don't know, QuickBooks is giving me trouble, or I've heard about FreshBooks and I want to try it. Well, here's what I'd recommend. Number one, figure out if your new accounting software is going to fit your needs. FreshBooks, while it's very intuitive and simple and seamless, doesn't fit everyone's need. If you're a product-based business, FreshBooks will not be for you. It's a service-based business kind of software. So you want to make sure that your new accounting software will fit your needs. Also, FreshBooks invoices per clients, and it could get really expensive for less features. So in particular, like I said, if you're not that happy, or maybe you want to switch to Xero, which is more comparable to QuickBooks. Again, I like Xero, I like it, but honestly for me, the accessibility is And when I went to their roadshow in Austin, spoke to the Xero team, they're like, we'll fix accessibility when we get to it. So for that reason, I don't really like Xero that much. QuickBooks for the win. Now, I know QuickBooks has a lot of other problems and with Intuit and trying to compete with us. But again, I say that the most important factor for me as a blind bookkeeper is accessibility. So I will stand behind my promise with Intuit, and I will give them money because they're making their stuff accessible. And again, FreshBooks is too, but FreshBooks is not for everyone. And they even admit that FreshBooks isn't for everyone. So that's super important because they admit, they're like, hey, FreshBooks is not for everyone. So if you're going to switch accounting software, number one, you want to make sure that it's actually going to fit your needs. Number two, you want to do it at the beginning of the year. Easiest thing to do, right? Because you already have your taxes done, or maybe, you got your tax date and you're going to switch for a new year. You also want to make sure that you have a new way to invoice, because for me, I'm going to be getting a new client portal practice management system. And so I want to make sure that I have a great way to invoice, but I want to do that at the beginning of the year and warn people. Now, let's talk about websites for a second, because accounting software, we've got that done, right? We talked about how we're going to do that. But we need to talk about website, because if you're going to be getting a new website, you want to try to plan that out. You don't really need to plan that out at the beginning of the year like you do other things. But if you're getting a practice management software, that is something you need to plan out, because that way your clients know the beginning of the year you're getting a new software and here's how it's going to work. So for me, I'm going to be trying out a new software called Lisio. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. But basically, it's a cloud practice management software for accountants and bookkeepers. And I've actually got a sales call tomorrow with a rep. And I'm going to be giving them a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to be asking them about accessibility, and I'm going to be giving them, my thoughts. They already know that I'm blind because I wrote a huge, long bio thing in the Calendly invite. But basically, I'm going to be doing that. And I just want to do that at the beginning of the year so that way they all know that, hey, I'm going to be getting a new system. And that's how the invoicing is going to work, through Lisio, as well as the time tracking. It's basically a project management system for accountants. Now, the other thing I like about it, too, is it's a password manager for accountants as well. So basically, your clients can be able to add passwords, and you can add passwords. It's like a mutual one password, but for accountants, right? It's got accountant level security and that kind of thing. Also, if you want to send tax returns, or you need to send tax returns, that's very important, because I know that I don't want to send tax returns through Dropbox. That does not sound good or secure. So Lisio is going to be a great way to do that. Now, why am I going to be doing Lisio if I'm going to be using CPA Site Solutions, because they already have practice management software? Well, folks, I hate to break it to you, but unfortunately my relationship with CPA Site Solutions had to end. So here's the thing. I was on the call with a rep the other day, and they basically are like, Taylor, your site's about ready to go live. I said, oh yeah? I said, well, there's about 20 or 30 accessibility problems. How do you want to address those? They're like, we're going to add UserWay on your site. I said, well, didn't I say that when I set up this website, I said I'm not going to use UserWay because they'll just make it worse, and that will be it'll be a sin because I work in the accessibility industry. So basically, they went back on their promises. They said, oh yeah, well, we're going to use UserWay anyway. I said, well, oh yeah, I said, if you're going to do that, then I'm not going to give you my money. I just put it flat out at that. I said, you don't deserve my money if you guys are going to back up on your promises and tell me one thing and deliver another. So I was very nice and very cordial about it, but I said, I'm sorry, but relationship is not going to work out. Which means that I'm going to be getting a website through WordPress like I had originally intended, through a new vendor, of course. But I'm going to be using a cloud practice management software to supplement the client portal that I'd be missing in the first place. So that's why a Listio is going to be, hopefully, in the cards. They don't have an accessibility overlay on their website, so at least they're doing somewhat better. We'll see if they actually can deliver. But that's why I'm going to have a meeting with a sales rep tomorrow. But I'm going to actually be saving about $40 a month. So I'm actually pretty happy that I did this, but it's still a pain in my butt. The other thing that these practice management softwares have is they have the ability to take payments, so like ACH and that kind of thing. And the way that they told me is that ACH is only $1. So that'll be really nice to be able to handle that, because that way I could just do ACH and I could do recurring retainers for $1. That'll be nice. So, long story short, if you want to do new practice management software, go ahead and do that at the beginning of the year. Well, folks, I think that'll do it for this episode. I know it was pretty long-winded and a lot of information, but what I would say is now is a great time to look at your business, look at your processes, see where you can automate, see what things you should probably clean up, and just kind of take an inventory. You know, do an audit of your business. Now, of course, if you're in tax season and you don't have a lot of time to do that, then maybe you shouldn't, right? Because if you're doing a bunch of tax returns, then maybe I, shouldn't. But really, this advice is for bookkeepers and others who don't really have a huge busy season. I mean, we do, right? But it's not like an entire thing where it would be for like public accounting firms. So what I would say is use this advice at your own discretion, but if you're going to do things like this, I would recommend doing it at the beginning of the year if you can, because it'll just make things a lot easier. But again, that's really all I have this episode. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. And, have a great holiday, everyone, and we will talk next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the BookSight podcast. You can find show notes, transcripts, and ways to support the show at BookSight.net. Let's get social. Follow us on Twitter at BookSightPod and like us on Facebook at BookSight Podcast. You can also connect with us on Mastodon at accounting.social. Our host, Taylor Arndt, is on Twitter at TayArndt, and her website is at tayfinance.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and let us know what you thought. We'll be back next week with more tips and insights on accounting, bookkeeping, and small business tasks. This was a Payon Media production.